Hemp's had a role in almost every chapter of American history. It was actually illegal for early colonists of Jamestown to not grow hemp because our founding fathers were enthusiastic hemp farmers. And even the Declaration of Independence was drafted on hemp paper. And when Americans moved west, they took hemp-covered wagons onto new frontiers. And when the gold rush hit, the 49ers even wore hemp Levi dungarees as they sought their fortunes. And in 1938, Popular Mechanics named it America's new billion-dollar crop, noting its many uses and how easy farmers find it to grow. The magazine added, it can be grown in any state of the union. Yet it wasn't long before this last fact was no longer true. So what happened exactly that made hemp disappear? Unfortunately for the hemp industry, industrial hemp cultivation is blocked by the same draconian drug laws which outlaw marijuana possession and consumption. Hemp and marijuana are different varieties of the same species of plant, Cannabis sativa L, and they're grown for different purposes. Marijuana is the flowering tops and leaves of psychoactive varieties of cannabis that are grown for their high THC content. And hemp is the low THC oilseed and fiber varieties of cannabis, which is grown for their seeds and fiber. Marijuana is classed as a Schedule I drug by the federal government along with heroin. Now, the U.S. is one of the only few industrialized nations to ban hemp cultivation. So even though hemp can clothe, house, and nourish us, even though hemp can be used to make vehicles that won't choke landfills with rusting metal, and even though it can help to clean polluted soil for future crop growth, Americans are often unable to maximize their use of the centuries-old plant. Now, here to explain why the federal government continues to keep hemp out of American fields is Eric Steenstra, president of Vote Hemp, a grassroots advocacy group that's leading the charge to bring hemp farming back in the United States. Check it out. Thank you so much, Eric, for joining me today. I'd like you to explain to our viewers, how exactly did we go from Jamestown, where it was completely illegal to not grow hemp, to the government's own World War II era Hemp for Victory program to blanket prohibition?
Yeah, it's a complicated story, but yeah, so obviously the United States had a long history from, colonial times, from the beginnings of the country with using hemp as a resource, and it was a very important resource, really in American agriculture going back, like I said, going back to the founding fathers grew it. And what ended up happening was in the 1930s, when there was a push towards banning marijuana, hemp got caught up in that. At that time, they had no real understanding of what the what it was in the cannabis plant that caused people to have this euphoric high feeling. And so the hemp, even though when they had hearings in Congress, there were people that stood up and said, well, we need to still be able to grow hemp, and they were assured that they could. Eventually that policy led to what we have today. And finally, the final nail in the coffin was in 1970 when the Congress passed the Controlled Substances Act. And at that time, they put marijuana in the most restrictive schedule, which didn't allow for any use, except for research under strict license from the DEA. And at that point, they did not distinguish between varieties of cannabis that were grown for industrial purposes and drug type varieties of cannabis. So hemp got lost there. And, that's where we are today. Basically how we got here today. So.
Right. And I'm glad you talked about that, because states are now increasingly moving to define hemp as distinct from marijuana and to encourage industrial hemp cultivation in research settings because of activism and, just information about this. So why does the federal government continue, though, to deliberately curtail industrial hemp cultivation efforts by lumping it into the Schedule I category with marijuana?
Well, like I said, Congress defined marijuana broadly and then put it in this drug control scheme that involved these schedules and whatnot. And so we had a breakthrough in 2014. The president signed some new legislation from Congress that allowed for pilot programs and research under the Farm Bill. And so for the first time in many decades, we've seen some of those pilot programs taking place in a number of states around the country: Kentucky, Tennessee, Colorado, Indiana, North Dakota, Hawaii, a number of states have participated last year, and more will be involved this year. But basically, those are still not, the law still doesn't allow for commercial cultivation. And so what we really need at this point to change that is Congress needs to pass some pending legislation. We do have a bill in the House and a bill in the Senate, virtually identical bills that have pretty strong bipartisan support, but we just haven't been able to move them forward yet to get a hearing and actually have a chance to have a vote on them. We do have some movement in terms of getting some more support for the bills. Our bill in the Senate, which is S-134, sponsored by Senator Wyden and co-sponsored by Majority Leader Senator McConnell and a number of other members of the Senate, has 14 co-sponsors. So that's 14 out of, the 100 senators. And then in the House, our bill there, H.R. 525, which is sponsored by Representative Massey from Kentucky, and has now 69 co-sponsors, including 25 or 26 Republicans and 47 Democrats. So it's got broad bipartisan support. But, in the Congress today, things are still pretty polarized. There's not a lot of legislation that moves. And so we have to find the right opportunity when, we can move the bill forward. We still don't haven't found the right opportunity. So we're hopeful that'll happen in the very near future.
In the past couple of years, there's obviously been a major movement, a public movement around marijuana legalization, with more and more states legalizing marijuana for recreational and medical use. Has this movement, in your opinion, had any impact on efforts to promote industrial hemp cultivation on U.S. soil?
I do think that the fact that we're, as a nation, we're looking at cannabis policy generally has helped to move things forward for hemp, because hemp has been, hemp policy has been intertwined with marijuana policy. So I think the fact that states and federal government have been taking a look at this has been helpful.
Well, like with any movement, there's always going to be some special interest trying to block it. Ultimately, who has the most to lose from the federal government's blocks on industrial hemp cultivation? I mean, who are the corporations? Who are the special interest groups? And who has the most to gain?
Well, farmers and industry have the most to gain. As far as who has the most to lose, honestly, I think there's a perception within the DEA that somehow this is a loss for them because they're losing control over some portion of cannabis. But I think it's really, no loss there at all. I think that, I'm not really sure that there's anyone that really loses from this. So, I think it's a big plus for the United States. Like I said, American farmers will gain, American businesses will gain, and, it'd be beneficial for the long term for the U.S.
I'm somewhat hopeful, and I know that, you're putting a lot of effort into making this happen, but what are some of the most promising things on the horizon for hemp in the United States? Is America's billion-dollar crop making a comeback?
Sure. I mean, well, so right now we have, more than $500 million worth of products that, being sold at retail that are coming from imports, right? So, we've got imports coming from Canada and from Europe and from China, and all those farmers in those countries are able to grow hemp and produce products and then ship them into the United States. Right now, it makes no sense at all that American farmers are being denied the ability to grow a crop that we've historically had grown for centuries, that has so many beneficial uses. I mean, we're talking about nutritious foods, body care. We're talking about, car parts. We're talking about building materials. We're talking about clothing, energy. We're talking about, just a really incredibly diverse plant. I mean, that has a lot of uses, and it can be grown in all 50 states. We don't have, we have only one fiber crop in the United States really right now, and that's cotton. It can only be grown in certain states. It's not sustainable, environmentally friendly. Hemp would be an alternative fiber for many uses there. The seed has a really nutritious profile. It's got a great balance of omega-3 and omega-6 essential fatty acids. Those are the good fats that doctors recommend for health. It has a full, complete protein and a number of other nutrients in it. There's just so much that can potentially be done. Even they're now in Europe, they figured out a way to build homes using hempcrete, which is a material that uses the core of the stalk mixed with lime to produce a sustainable, natural material that has incredible insulative properties. And so there's just so many different things that could potentially be done with this. And it just doesn't make a whole lot of sense that American companies have to import it and then American farmers aren't able to participate in the market.
Well, thank you so much, Eric, for joining me today, president of Vote Hemp. Thank you so much.
Thanks for having me.